Welcome to the Sales for Nerds podcast. I'm Chief Nerd Ruben Swartz. If you feel more comfortable with SQL than sales calls, more at home writing test suites than proposals, more interested in crunching numbers than shaking hands, if you think networking should be about routers rather than cocktails with strangers, and if you're more interested in debating code editors than negotiating deals, but somehow you ended up responsible for some of those sales and marketing activities, this is the podcast for you. So today I'm excited to have Christina Bell with us. Christina is with Sandler Training here at Market Sense in Austin. And for folks who have been listening to the podcast, we did have Adam Boyd on from Sandler Training here at Market Sense in Austin earlier as well. And so people are probably wondering, hey, what is going on? Are you guys just an outgrowth of Sandler or something like that? And the answer is no. I think Adam and Christina both have awesome things to say about sales, and they're both awesome people to drink wine with. And that's kind of the real reason that we're here. So Christina, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
And the way this table is laid out, could I get you to pour us some wine, please?
Oh, absolutely. Let's see.
And today we have, I think it's called a Starmont Pinot Noir from California. Christina said she is a Pinot Noir fan, so that fits well with me.
Perfect. All right. We have wine ready.
All right. Cheers. Welcome to Sales for Nerds.
Thank you so much. Very nice. Thank you.
All right. And usually by about halfway through the interview, it starts to open up and get really good.
Great.
There's sort of a side project of I'm learning sales and marketing, but I'm also learning a little bit about wine as we go.
It's added benefit.
Very
perfect
productivity bonus. So, Christina, how did you get into this role? You didn't start off as a sales coach.
I did not. So I actually started off right out of college, and I was a business major in college, and so it was one of those coming out Gen X was when it was hard to find a job in the market, and so I took the first job offered, and it was in a call center, and it was in sales. Never something I thought I would be doing. It was inside sales though. And what was interesting is that I was there for a while, and I was asked by the HR department to come help with their new hire training class.
Now, does this mean that you were doing a good job in sales?
Well, apparently they thought so. So I decided to go help them, and I loved it. And I really enjoyed helping people learn. And I thought, well, if I'm going to try to pursue this as a career, I need to figure out what I'm doing. So I went back to school. I got my MBA with a concentration in human resource management. So that was the whole training and development, adult learning theory, organizational development kind of thing. And then from there on out, I had this just weird combination of sales and human resources. So I worked for a property management group in human resources, supporting the sales function and operations function. I worked for ADP, the big payroll company, in more of an account management type of position. And then went to work with Xerox in their Dayhill division.
Okay.
And worked there with the sales managers in developing their sales teams. And then one day I discovered Sandler. I stumbled across Sandler online and loved it. And so I jumped into Sandler with both feet and opened a franchise location in Houston. And I had that business for 4 years. And then about a year ago, I moved to Austin to Market Sense to combine forces with Carl Scheibel here in Austin.
All right.
So that's kind of the long story, I guess.
And so how long has it been since you have been sort of on the front line selling? Or would you say you're still doing that today?
I will tell you, that's one thing that is different about Sandler, because most training companies have somebody who sells the training and then somebody else who teaches the training. And I really was attracted to Sandler because if we spend time training in the classroom, we actually have to bring in the business to populate the classrooms. And so it gives us a very unique perspective when we're talking to clients, because our client will tell us, okay, we're seeing something new in the market. Here's what's going on. And I can say to them, oh my gosh, I see that too. I know exactly what you're talking about. And so we have that real life experience to bring along with us into the classroom.
Right. I remember Adam saying, I can't have too much wine. I have to go make some prospecting calls after this.
Right. That sounds about right. I don't know. Maybe they get better after. I didn't say that.
I feel like there's a curve, right? Like after the first one, it gets better, but after too many, it goes downhill. Right. So let's go back to that early, like I'm just out of college. I happen to get a job in sales. Somehow I feel like you're skipping over the part where you learn to sell really well.
No, actually, I was very lucky because the organization I joined had a training program. They had a 4-week training program coming in for new hires. A lot of companies, you start and they are like, okay, great. We're glad to have you here. Now go sell.
Here's a phone and a phone book.
Exactly. And I did not have that experience. But at the time, it was very much the features and benefits, kind of the traditional sales methodology. That's how everybody did it. And but like I said, it was definitely a start, definitely something.
But you weren't the only one going through this training program, right? There were a bunch of other people, but somehow you absorbed it or you applied it better, or what did you do differently?
It's because I got hooked on helping people. And so I found the need. It's funny. I come from this whole line of teachers.
Okay.
And so they were all shocked when I went into business. They're like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And so then when I came back and said, no, I'm going to teach adults. And they're like, okay, now you can come to, Thanksgiving. Right. But so yeah, I really enjoyed the aspect of looking at sales as a way to really help people and to make a difference for people. So I stayed in that line of sales and human resources training and development for a long time until I got into Sandler.
And so when you start training some of these folks who've been doing sales for a while, how do they react to that kind of philosophy? I feel like some people, that's very natural. And some people are like, no, wait a second. You're supposed to beat the prospect into submission or something.
Right. And I'll tell you, that is not our philosophy. With Sandler, we believe sales is just about open and honest communication and finding a way to do that. And that's hard, especially a lot of people who are really involved in tech and technical sales. They got into it. They enjoy the technical aspect of it. And sometimes their interactions with people are not as polished.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And of course, I'm speaking in generalities here. But when we get into the fact that all sales is really having a conversation with somebody and having that open and honest communication, it really helps people understand they don't have to be that traditional hardcore beat them over the head kind of salesperson. When I teach these sales techniques, I tell people that that old adage of they could sell ice to Eskimos, that's not necessarily a compliment.
Right.
Yeah, unless they need ice. If they need ice, sell them ice. But if they don't need ice, don't sell it to them. So today's buyer is a lot more sophisticated. And, if we're going to treat this as really a profession, we need to be ethical. We need to take care of our customer and be doing this for the right reasons.
So I think everyone would smile and nod and say, yeah, of course we should do all that stuff. And then a lot of people go out there and they're like, I can't remember. Somebody said something about something, but I got to go close this deal.
Yeah.
How do you keep that in mind when you're going about your day-to-day sales practice?
So the way I look at sales, and again, this is not me necessarily, this is a Sandler philosophy, is that sales is truly a sorting exercise, right? It is definitely, go get the money because you've got to sell it to make the money. If you're going to have a tech career, a tech business, it's still at the end of the day, you've got to be able to sell it to somebody to support your business, support your family. But the thought of going out there and closing everybody is not necessarily the right way to approach it. If you think about, my favorite example is comparing it to chocolate, right? If I had a candy bar and I was trying to sell this chocolate bar to somebody who did not like chocolate, even if it was the best candy in the world, even if it was the best price in the world, they wouldn't want it. They don't like chocolate. They don't need chocolate. But if I take that same candy bar and I find the person who's just, the chocolate addict, they're going to be in heaven with it. And so what it's really about is sales is a sorting exercise that you've got to find the people who want the product that you need. And people get frustrated because you have so much rejection. Well, you do hear a lot of no's because you're going through and you're talking to a lot of people who don't like chocolate. Well, maybe not a lot, but but depending on what you're selling, there's going to be a lot of people who don't need it, who don't have a want for it. But that's the challenge and the simplicity of sales is that it's not brain surgery. It's not, but it does take some perseverance. It does take some extending yourself to find those people who want chocolate and need chocolate.
So I think that's a great point, right? If you're trying to force chocolate on someone who doesn't want it, you've already screwed up.
That's right.
And I think it's easy to say, well, if I just sell a little harder, I'm going to convince them to want chocolate. When really, especially if you're sort of the engineering type, you want to go to your root cause analysis and say, the whole problem is
that's right.
I'm in the wrong place.
That's right. And the other example of that is sometimes I can see why this person should want chocolate. Right? I mean, they have all the characteristics of somebody who should like chocolate. It looks like for the rest of their diet, chocolate would be a good addition, but they don't see it. They don't want it. And I can't convince them to do that unless they see it. And that's a lot of what sales is about. Is a lot of what we teach in this communication skills is how to ask good questions to get them to figure out, well, maybe I could use some chocolate.
So that's a great point, because I think a lot of people get to this stage. They're like, okay, I know I have to specialize. I'm not selling chocolate to everybody. I'm selling, raspberry caramel sea salt chocolate to certain people and so on. And then they find somebody who, like you say, they check all the boxes,
right?
But they still don't want it.
That's right.
How do you know? Do you just back out and say they said they don't want it, I'm leaving? How do you know if you should persist?
Right. So the rule here is that we can't convince somebody they need something until they discover that they have a need for it. So if we get really good at asking them questions and getting them to think about it, to think about their process, to think about their systems, how they would use this, and discover that they could have a need, then we can go into selling it to them. But if we ask the questions and they're either in denial about it, or, sometimes they have other issues that were more pressing. Mm-hmm. They could use it, but they've got 10 other things they've got to deal with over here that are more urgent. And so, at that point, it's a matter of, it's not a fit right now. Even though it's not a fit, it doesn't say anything about, my chocolate. I still have good chocolate. It doesn't say anything about me or my company. They just don't like chocolate, or they're not ready for my chocolate. And then I go to somebody else and find somebody else who I can ask about it.
So what kind of questions should people be asking in that case?
Yeah, now that is probably the $1 million question right there, because how much time do we have here? That is a lot of what we spend time in our classes talking to people about how to ask those questions. And we talk about everything from the right voice tone and intonation to use when you're asking the questions to specifically what words do you use? And it can be, starting from a point of, you probably don't even like chocolate. You probably don't even eat chocolate, right? To, well, how would you use chocolate? Have you thought about it? So we have probably 5 different, 6 different, 7 different techniques to use in questioning strategies, not including all the different behavior styles and the ways that we can apply those things. But I would say if you're trying to get better at sales, that's a good place to start, is becoming a student of asking questions and helping people think through their problems and their situations.
And obviously, we can't condense a whole training course into a little snippet of a podcast. But is there like an example of something that maybe could just trigger someone's thinking on this? Like, I'm trying to sell a website to somebody who needs a new website, but they, even though they're in my target market and vertical and whatnot, they don't want it. Like, what should I be saying to them that would maybe...
Right. So I'll give you an example. So I worked once with I started to say a property management company, but we're technical. So let's talk about a website.
Okay.
Somebody who has a website and they are selling their skills to develop somebody else's website. And so I might say something to them like, looked at your website, it looks pretty good. And they say, are you kidding? I really need to update that. Right. So just by that very first question, what most people do, they try to come on too strong. They try to say, "Hey, let me introduce myself. I saw your website. Looks like you really need, can you use some help
Here are
with
the
that."
20 things wrong with it.
Exactly. And immediately that business owner feels on the defensive, right? Because they're probably the one who, either put it together or hired somebody to put it together or approved it. And so now they look at this as more of an attack on their website.
Right.
But if you say, "Well, I looked at your website, not bad, it looks pretty good." And they say, "Oh, really?" They're going to tell you 20 reasons why it's a horrible website. And so it's a way of just kind of getting the conversation flowing without going into kind of hyper RoboCop salesperson, and attack mode on them. They feel like they have to defend themselves against you instead of coming to kind of meet you in the conversation.
So that makes a lot of sense. So let's say we have that conversation. You're like, "Ruben, you don't need a new website, do you? It looks really good." And I'm like, "Oh gosh, here's all the things I hate about it." You're like, "Blah, blah, blah, blah." And then I'm like, "Well, I don't want to buy this," right? Even though you've identified me as liking chocolate or needing a new website or whatever. I think this is where a lot of people get stuck and they kind of spin their wheels. They don't know. They don't want to let go. They don't want to let go of an opportunity that could be valid.
Right.
They've been told, "Hey, you got to be persistent with sales,"
Sure.
et cetera.
Sure.
And at the same time, they don't want to be a pest, and there's an opportunity cost to keeping this thing hanging around in the pipeline, whether or not it's so how do they tell whether it's a real legitimate opportunity?
So what we tell our folks is to look for pain. And pain in that terms is what is really impacting the business owner. Is it something that their website is causing them to lose business? Is their website, or is it, fine for their purposes right now? What we're looking for is some kind of compelling reason for that business owner to do something different. And so, again, if we use questions, we can ask them as questions to say, well, how much business are you getting from your website? And they say, "Oh, I'm getting, 100 orders a month." You say, "Wow, 100 orders, that's great. That's probably all you ever need, right?" And they say, "Well, I wouldn't say that," right? And then you're off and rolling but the key is the subtle questioning and not to just pounce on people and say, "Well, wouldn't you like to have more orders? Because I can give you more." We position it so that they feel like they need to justify. They end up almost selling themselves because they're telling you why they need more orders. And then they tell you. So we could kind of, role play it through it a little bit.
Okay.
So I would say, "Hey, Ruben, your website looks spot on. Really impressive. I looked at it. It's great."
And now I'm going to go way out on a limb with my acting chops and say, "No, it doesn't. It looks terrible."
And I'll say, what do you mean it looks terrible? I thought it had some good points in there. What would you change?
Well, I'm always meaning to go update it, but one thing and another, you just never seem to have the time, and it looks good a year or two ago, but then it's out of date, and people ask me questions, and I keep meaning to update the FAQs, but I never do.
Right. Well, do you think that's costing you business?
I don't know if I necessarily get a lot of business from my website because, it's really just all word of mouth.
Yeah.
I hear that one a lot,
So
actually.
for your industry, probably then that must be typically how people do it. They don't find people on websites to do business.
I think that's really true, but gosh, it would be a big breakthrough if I could be the one who could use my website.
Well, so, Ruben, I don't know if I can help you with your website or not. Probably not. It's probably in pretty good shape or doing what you want to do with it. But would it be worth us sitting down and taking a look at it and see if there's some areas that might be an improvement on there for you?
It probably would, but gosh, I'm just so busy.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm going to step out of role play for a second and point out just a couple of things, right? So one is we're in this prospecting kind of conversation. And in prospecting, we're not trying to sell anything, right? All we're trying to sell is a meeting, some time to talk to the person. And I think that's where a lot of people jump the gun because they're so focused on selling something, they start talking about their product or their service way too soon in the conversation. So keep in mind that those early networking meetings, it's just about let's sit down and let's have a conversation together and see if it even makes sense. The other thing I said was this probably isn't even for you. This is probably, I don't even know if I can help you with this. Okay. Now, what salesperson says that? Right. But what we do, if we say something like that, it takes the pressure off our prospect.
Right.
Because I say, I'm probably not even a fit for you. But, we can sit down and take a look at it if you'd like to. Yeah. And if they say, no, I don't have time, I say, you know what? No problem. I look at it as me disqualifying them because I'm not going to chase them down. I have a valuable service to offer, right? My website can make them money, can make their lives easier, can take their business to the next level, right? I know that I can do that with my website. So I just have to go find the right business owner who's willing to have that conversation. It's not about every single business owner you meet, chasing them down to have that appointment. It's finding the ones that truly are interested and making that investment into their company.
And I noticed that in a lot of your questioning, it's kind of like most salespeople are trying desperately to get a yes, and they really don't want to know. So they'll kind of settle for a maybe, which seems like the worst of all possible worlds. And what you're saying is you're almost inviting the no.
Absolutely.
And they have to opt into yes.
That's exactly right. In fact, if somebody tells me, call me next quarter, I actually had this happen today. Call me next quarter and we'll talk. I said, you know what? I appreciate you saying that, but most people, when they tell me that, what they're really saying is this is not for them. Is that what I'm hearing from you? And this guy this morning was like, oh, no, I'm really interested. And I said, so you're going to take my call when I call you? And he laughed. He's like, yeah, here's my cell phone.
Okay.
And he gave me a cell phone. So it's just a way to really kind of test it, because otherwise you end up wasting time and energy following up with these people that really aren't interested in doing business. But they're trying to be nice, they're trying to be sociable, and they like you, so they don't want to tell you that.
Yeah, we have a hard time with a hard no, right? As much as we think we have this hard charging business culture, it's still hard for people just to slam the door, most people to slam the door in your face.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. So it's becoming comfortable getting that no.
And so if we rewind this back another step, it seems like part of this is having a valuable service that is valuable to someone and knowing exactly who it's valuable to so that you can try to conduct the sorting exercise. If you don't know who's going to sort where, it's very hard to sort anybody, right?
That is huge. That is huge. A lot of times people want to cast this big net because they say, anybody could be my client. Website guy. Anybody could be my client, right? Which is absolutely true. But his net is so wide, he doesn't catch anybody. Instead, if you focus in on a particular vertical and say, okay, I'm going to be the world's best for the food industry, grocery stores, or restaurants. I'm going to really create a name for myself in the restaurant world for creating these great websites. Then, even though you've got this more tailored focus, you're better positioned to make more inroads, make more progress into that market.
I think one thing is, it's funny because we're using this website example, but here in Austin, I believe there's about 50 million web designers.
Right.
And I asked all of them, well, what's your specialty? So that if I find the right prospect, I can refer you. And 99% of them say anybody with a website.
Yeah.
Or anyone who doesn't have a website, then they really need me.
Right.
And I'm like, now I'm lost.
That's right. That's right. Well, and that also comes down to how do you differentiate yourself? Because, we go to these networking events and we say, I design websites. And they talk to the next web developer, and two spaces down at the networking event. What do you do? I design websites. So when that person goes home, how do they remember you versus the other web developers that they met that evening? So that's where we have to have that compelling, okay, I specialize in developing amazing websites for the restaurant industry that really stick out and drive business to this location. And I've had this success. So that gives us really something to talk about and something that makes us different and stand out in that market. The other thing is that you really need to pay attention to that differentiator. Because, if somebody said, well, why should I work with you? My answer is, I don't know if you should. I don't know what you need yet. I don't know what your concerns are. If you even have a problem, I can help you address. I can tell you, though, if you ask my clients, I've got one client who we started working together. In 8 weeks, she doubled her number of new appointments. I have another client who we worked together. He knew that he was going to lose this big account. So beforehand, we strategized on it. He went to that meeting. Not only did he not lose it, he made $100,000 sale in that meeting. But for you, I don't even know if this makes sense for you.
So you kind of have to have your unique selling proposition. And then someone's going to say, well, how would that apply to me if it's unclear? And then you have to not dive right in, but maybe offer some examples of what you've done with other people.
Perfect. Because if you use past clients, so think about what your clients did, how they raved about you, what they said about you, how they became raving fans. Insurance is another example, right? Because I meet tons of people in the insurance industry when I'm out networking, and they all say, well, I can protect your home and your auto and but again, they all kind of blend together. But if they told a story, oh yeah, my client, their house burned down and I was in their yard within an hour helping them fill out the form or, helping them find a place to stay. That kind of stuff would really stick out to help people remember you and what you do.
And it seems like they're at that beginning phase, whether it's in person or online or whatever, there's sort of this delicate dance of you want to qualify them.
Yes.
And they also want to qualify you, right?
Yes.
They don't want to sit down and have a meeting with you yet.
Right.
Because their time is valuable and their sort of privacy is valuable. How do you negotiate that at the very beginning and see if there's that chance for them to kind of come into your office, as it were?
So let's talk about, that's a great question. So let's talk about how you would qualify that first, because that's something a lot of salespeople do not spend enough time in that qualification step, and they waste a lot of their time. And if you're an entrepreneur, time is money.
Mm-hmm.
So we say something like, hey, love your website, looks phenomenal. And even though maybe it doesn't, right? And our business owner says, why, thank you. I'm really proud of it. We worked hard to put it together. I appreciate your comment. Bing, I just disqualified him, right? Because he's not going to be open to anything I have to say. So it's a kind of an easy way to throw that out there versus if he says, oh my gosh, you like that website? I need to update it. So it's kind of tricky. That first statement is going to be well crafted, how you position it. Because if it's not a great website, you don't want to say, oh my gosh, this is a phenomenal website. Say, oh, I visited your website. You probably get a lot of traffic through there, something like that, where it's not commenting maybe on the website, but you probably get a lot of traffic. You're
finding something positive to say, basically.
Exactly, where they can react to that, and then that gives you some idea of, am I qualifying them or not?
Without sounding disingenuous, without sounding
like
throwing away your credibility by complimenting a really crappy website or whatever.
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
And so then again, they could be a great prospect for you, right? Mm-hmm. Underlying it. But if they say, yeah, thanks, we're proud of it, you just move on because there's other fish in the ocean.
That's exactly right. Look at the new business starting every day in Austin. Huge. All the people flocking here. There's tons of fish in the ocean.
And of course, some people might say, well, that's great. You hipsters in Austin think you're so great. Sipping your wine and doing your podcast. But what about us real people in the heartland or wherever, right? Where maybe the economy isn't booming so much and there is more pressure, right? There's always more pressure when you feel like the pie itself isn't growing and that if you miss something, you may not be able to replenish that opportunity.
Right. So I will tell you, not even the best salesperson out there is going to close 100% of the deals. Period. There's just no way. A lot of the really good ones are closing maybe, it depends on what they sell, but 50%, 30%, 20%, depends on the industry. So you cannot put that kind of pressure on yourself. You have to, if you're going to be in sales, which like it or not, if you own a business, you're in sales.
Right.
So if you're going to be in sales, you've got to know going out there, it's a sorting exercise. You've got to get your own mind in the right place before you begin this journey. And you've got to have, even in those economies where, it may be a little tighter, you still have to have that mindset of there's plenty of fish in the sea. Because otherwise, especially in those smaller communities. So I moved here from Houston, right? And big community.
Right.
But it's still small town. I would say to somebody, oh, Jennifer was, I know Jennifer, and how many Jennifers are there in Austin? I didn't even say her last name, and other people knew her, and that's a true story. But same thing. You quickly develop a name for yourself. And if you become known as that high pressure, people go, oh, make sure you don't go near Ruben at the, at the buffet line. He's going to hit you up for a website.
He's going to spill his wine all over you.
That's right. That's right. So you got to find the right people.
And some of this comes back to, I was actually thinking about this today, that's sort of like the strategic planning aspect, which maybe I don't do such a great job with, but it's sort of this notion of, it's your job as a business owner to understand how big your market is. Like, what is your market and how big is it? And does it support the kind of business that you want to have?
That's true.
Right. And so if you say, my market turns out there's only 10 people in it and I can only make $10,000 a year, well, don't be upset that you're making 10 grand a year. You got to adjust your market.
That's true.
Versus if your market is 10 million or 10 billion a year, right? If it's 10 billion, maybe you're casting too wide a net and you need to focus in a little bit. But once you have that, then you can kind of go figure out where to go find these people who are more likely to be reasonable prospects.
Yeah. Part of that too is really getting clear in your own head who it is that is your best prospect. So if you're struggling with that, think about your ideal customer. Think about a customer that you have right now that is just great. Somebody who pays you on time, who is not
nice.
Yeah, exactly. They're not high maintenance. They are appreciative of your work. That, how could you clone that person?
Right.
And where would you find that clone?
Right.
And so we start thinking about it a little bit more strategically than just going out there and, networking as much as we can or cold calling or whatever we're doing.
And something that a lot of people, I think, neglect to do is that when they have an ideal customer, asking that very person where to get more like them.
Yeah, that is true too. So, that's a really good point. So related to this, it won't seem related at first, but related to this, I highly recommend not cutting your prices because your customers hang around with people like themselves. And so you cut your price and inevitably that's going to be the person who is high maintenance and, doesn't pay on time and just all kinds of issues. They're going to refer you to somebody just like them.
Right.
And not only that, they're going to say, and she'll give you a really good deal too. Right. And so they share that price point and it's just ongoing. So, stick with your price, show value in what you do, and work on escalating your client list, who your clients are.
Okay. So first of all, I think this wine is starting to taste really delicious, by the way.
I need to have some more here.
And it's not just because I'm sipping it. I think it's like, that's one thing that I notice as I do these, right? Like they open up a little bit. Like in theory, this is why people decant wine before they start drinking it. But, we have to make do here.
Very nice. Very nice. I have no complaints.
All right. So let's say we've got some good positioning. We've got a place to find customers. We've got a way to bring them in and, or sort of to try to force them out, but let them invite themselves in if they want to come in for a talk. How do we then figure out, is this a real prospect and how do we make this a real deal?
So you have to have, again, your own qualification criteria for it. So some things in your own head that you say, this person is not going to be my client unless they have X, Y, and Z. Right? So I can give you some examples. It might be something like they have to have money, right? That's an easy one. If they don't have money, you don't work for free. Maybe they have to live in a certain geographic area. I'm not going to travel outside of Austin or outside of Texas. Maybe you specialize in an area that there's a certain size or in a certain industry or, whatever those things that you decide that your product or your service is a better fit for, you start developing criteria that would disqualify them if they are outside of those parameters. So then as you go through your sales process, you're asking questions to find out, well, are you only in Austin or you have other offices that you would need help with? Oh, we have offices all over. Oh, ding, they're disqualified.
Let me refer you to my friend in New York or whatever.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Now, I think this budget and money thing is a really big deal. And one of the things that I noticed the hard way was that the people who are most eager to talk and spend a ton of time learning, listening, answering all my questions were the ones who maybe didn't have a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And they were sort of getting some free consulting. And so what are some ways that we can qualify or disqualify those folks without sounding crass? Because a lot of people are like, respond very well to, well, what's your budget?
Yeah, right. So that's a good point. And that actually is a question we need to ask, but not right away.
Right.
So what the goal is to, first of all, figure out what they're needing. Now, you made a good statement a moment ago. You mentioned the phrase free consulting, and that's kind of a no word, right? No free consulting, because typically consumers, that's what they want. They want information. And it doesn't matter if it's a individual or if it's a business, they're looking for information on how to solve their problem or how to work around their problem or how to determine the best person to fix their problem. And so what they want from the salesperson is that information.
Makes sense.
Once you give them that information, they don't need you anymore, right? And so if you've given, we call it candy here. Once you give away your candy, they have all your candy. They don't have no need for you anymore. And that's when you call them and they don't return your calls.
Right.
Right? Because they have all your candy. They don't need to talk to you. And so the trick on this here is they start asking you, well, what can you do? What is the scope of what you do? The trick of this is going back to the questioning strategies that I was talking about earlier, and ask them, say, well, I'd like to tell you, but I honestly don't know yet or how my service would even fit in with what you need until I get a better picture of what you're needing, what you're wanting. 80% of an appointment, a sales appointment, the first one especially, should be your prospect talking, not us talking. So where they're explaining to you what their need is, what their problem is, what their concern is. And as they're talking through this, they're building a picture for you that you're able to say, you're able to qualify them or not.
Right.
And you're able to determine if they are a good fit for what you have to offer, if you can really solve their problem, right? Because that's another thing we tend to do, which I think is, not ethical, is there's a problem we can mostly solve, not all the way, but it's, sort of a square peg in a round hole, but it still covers the hole. So we're going to try to sell it. And, they're not going to be happy at the end of the day. We're not going to be happy. And so it's better to disqualify them than to try to make that, fit. As we're asking these questions, one of the questions we can ask is, what is your budget? How much were you thinking of spending on this? And they tell us, and we can say, oh, I'd love to help you, but I'm more expensive than that. It's going to take more money. And, how do you feel about that? And could you come up with some? So it's all about, again, these questions and getting them to share what their vision is, how they want to fix it.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And it's funny because one of the reasons behind this podcast was it's like I like talking to people, and if people think I'm helpful, that's great. That's very flattering from an ego perspective, but I don't have time to do free consulting.
Right.
So here we get to drink some wine and hang out and talk. And then hopefully it also is useful to people. And sometimes people have a question and they're like, oh, Ruben, could I pick your brain, buy you a cup of coffee? And I'm like, no, but you can listen to this podcast episode that addresses these questions.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. But just be careful about giving so much of your candy that they don't need you. That's the only thing is that, it's a fine line between sharing and talks like this. I'm all for sharing best practices and giving some tips, but like I know as far as Sandler training, I've been a Sandler trainer for 5 years, and I train it and I teach people it, and I have students who are like, oh my gosh, how can I ever do what you do? But I watch Sandler trainers who've been in the business 14 years, and I'm looking at them going, oh my gosh, how do I, And so it's one of those. It's like I don't know, playing the piano or learning to speak a foreign language is something you can always get better at and always improve on. And it's not necessarily something you can quickly fix.
But I think going back to one of the things you said at the very beginning, which I think was super important to me because I had such a bad view of sales as an engineer.
Right.
Like it's like it's portrayed in the culture a certain way. And then when you start working at these software companies, the sales guys and the engineers are not necessarily aligned.
Of course. Yeah.
And so one of the things that really helped me was thinking of it as I'm helping.
Yes.
I'm not trying to sell someone on something that benefits me, but not them.
Yes.
I'm trying to help them solve a problem.
That's right.
And once I got my head in that place, everything was totally different.
Mm-hmm.
All the pressure came off me. I could dive in and sort of like, instead of feeling like, oh, sales is completely unnatural because I'm a nerdy, introverted engineer, it was like, I like to help people. This is great.
That's right. That's exactly right. Hey, you can turn it into my son 1 year wanted one of those big gaming systems, for Christmas. And I'm going to the Best Buy going, I have no idea, what to get home, what cables, what wires. Well, I'm about to spend a lot of money on this gaming system. I don't want to get home and have him be disappointed.
Right.
So same thing. Think about the amount of money somebody can spend developing a website.
Right.
And you hate for them to spend all that money and end up disappointed with the results at the end of the day. So you can have that impact to help them succeed more in their business, to help them get more clients, to help them. And so you're exactly right. If you look at it from that perspective, it really changes the whole way you view it.
And I think, especially when you're talking about people who are developing a website, or they're an architect or a lawyer or whatever, right? They're one of these people like in the E-Myth who bakes pies but doesn't necessarily run the pie shop.
Great
but
book.
if you know what the pie should taste like,
yes,
that's really helpful compared to someone who's great at taking orders and selling the pie, but maybe doesn't really understand the pie. Like there's certain things you bring to the table that they can't.
That's exactly right. A lot of entrepreneurs especially, I mentioned earlier, don't drop your price. They don't realize their value in the market. So they'll say, oh my gosh, it's just, half an hour of my time. I don't want to charge that much for half an hour. It's not a half an hour of your time. Think about how much time you spent in school, studying, learning this to be able to address that in half an hour.
Yep.
That's what they're paying for, is all that value they get from your studying and your years of experience and practice.
Right. The surgeon doesn't charge you for the half hour of fixing your shoulder. They charge you for the 20 years of training it took for them
exactly right.
fix your
medical
shoulder.
School. That's exactly
I'm tapping
right.
the titanium screw in my shoulder right now.
Right.
Well, Christina, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and cheers.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I started this podcast to help people avoid some of the mistakes that I've made. And if there's something that you've picked up from the show that's helped you in your business, I'd love to hear about it. You can leave feedback at salesfornerds.io, or even better, drop a review on iTunes. Let me know what's working, what's useful, what's helpful, and help get the word out. For example, here's Steve at Inside Sales Dude, who writes, outstanding practical advice for sales and entrepreneurs. Practical, relatable, and informative. I'm a lifelong technology sales professional who recently launched my own consulting business. This podcast is one of the few that addresses real issues that impact small business owners like me. Great stuff. Thanks so much, Steve. Appreciate the kind words and glad that it's useful to you. If you've got some tips or things that have been helpful for you in your business, please spend 30 to 60 seconds and drop a review. Thanks so much.